Okay, greetings. Welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about the solar eclipse happening on April 8th, 2024. And this eclipse is getting a lot of people are talking about this eclipse because it's going to be visible throughout most of North America. And it is a total solar eclipse which will happen for about 4 minutes. And if you look at the eclipse path, there are some parts of the United States that are going to go completely dark in the middle of the day. So quite a fascinating phenomenon that happens. And it is true that wherever the eclipse is directly visible, that part of the world, that geographic location, is going to feel the effects of the eclipse astrologically more so than in other places of the world where it's not visible. And this eclipse is getting talked about a lot also because of spelling doom and gloom for the United States, so to say, because it's going to be such an amazing visual sight, and of course because of the reputation that eclipses have for causing instability and chaos in our lives. Well, by just looking at the single eclipse chart for April 8th, you wouldn't be able to see the specific causes that this eclipse is doing, what it's happening astrologically on each individual, and then extrapolate that out to humanity. And that's because we need to use the technique of eclipse cycles and understand each individual eclipse within the context of its cycle. And if you watched my lunar eclipse video about March 25th, you'll have a little bit of an understanding, but I'm going to talk about it very briefly. And then we're going to study two charts, the foundational eclipse chart and then the current eclipse chart. But essentially what eclipse cycles are is that there is a foundational eclipse, an eclipse that happens that sets a 1300-year cycle in motion. And every 18 years there's going to be another eclipse in that cycle, and that's because it takes 18 years for the two nodes, Rahu and Ketu, or the north node and the south node, to go around the zodiac, a complete revolution around the zodiac, 18 years plus about 10 days. And so every 18 years we're getting another eclipse in a certain cycle. And these eclipses, so a foundational eclipse happens at a very, very slight, you can almost not see the eclipse happening at all, almost completely invisible. That's because the sun and moon are about 15 to 18 degrees away from the nodes. And these initial eclipses happen at the extremities of the Earth. So it's only visible at the extreme North Pole or the extreme South Pole. And they're very short, almost invisible eclipses. So every 18 years, what happens is that the eclipse goes, if it starts at the North Pole, it'll go a little bit more south every 18 years, that eclipse. And it also moves east to west by 120 degrees longitude. And so every 18 years it's getting closer and closer to the equator. And at the middle of the eclipse cycle, the eclipse will be right around the equator, and it's going to last upwards to an hour sometime. It's the longest duration of that eclipse, and that's going to be the most intense eclipse of that cycle. So after that intense eclipse, about the 35th or 36th eclipse of 70 to 72 eclipses in one cycle, it's going to start moving more south. And likewise, if the eclipse starts at the South Pole, it's going to move a little bit north every 18 years until it gets to the maximum eclipse, the most powerful eclipse around the equator. So it's important to understand that when we have that initial eclipse, that initial chart is going to be the theme felt through every eclipse in that cycle. So we have to study that initial chart of that foundational eclipse that creates a family of eclipses. And there are upwards to 42 eclipse cycles happening at any given moment in time. And they're all affecting each individual person differently. And so it's quite a fascinating subject. I'm planning on doing more videos about how we can get into more clear definitions and really break down how the cycles are working. And so, as I was saying, if we look at the initial chart, and I'm going to put up the chart right now of the eclipse that's happening on the April 8th, there's nothing astrologically happening that points to very many specifics whatsoever outside of a typical eclipse. So as you look at your chart, on the top you'll see the new moon. All solar eclipses happen at new moons. You'll see the sun and the moon at 19 degrees 24 minutes in Aries. Now, this eclipse is the 30th of the 70 eclipses, so we're actually increasing intensity with this cycle. But as you see in Aries, we have Mercury, which is fairly close, about 5 degrees away from the eclipse point of the sun and the moon's position. And then we have Venus a bit farther away. It's very common in almost every eclipse that we're going to have at least Mercury or Venus in the eclipse path, because they never stray very far from the sun. So eclipses are typically affecting our relationships, Venus, and our sense of value, and our ability to experiment and view the options in the world, and our ability to use logic and see patterns in the world, and our communication, which is Mercury. So eclipses are usually affecting those two areas of our life because they're almost always one of the two, or sometimes both, in the eclipse path. So first things first, look in your own chart and see what you have at 19 degrees Aries, within 10 degrees on either side. So 9 degrees Aries until 29 degrees Aries, whatever is in there, a planet or a house cusp, this eclipse is going to be impacting you according to whatever planet that is, or whatever house cusp or area of life that it's hitting. So take a look at your chart. Now the themes I'm going to be talking about is going to be affecting that area of your life or that planet. And so I'm going to show you another quick chart. If you're not used to seeing the South Indian chart style, if you look on this, you'll see that there are no major transits. There are no significant aspects happening whatsoever, except for Mercury being close to the eclipse path, and also it being close to Rahu, or the North Node, the new moon, so the Sun and Moon conjunction. And we don't have any significant transits that are impacting that eclipse path. So it's going to be an eclipse that affects Mercury predominantly, and also a little bit of Venus, those areas of our lives. We do have closing in conjunction of Mars and Saturn, and also Jupiter, Uranus. Those conjunctions are going to be happening a little bit later on into April. But there's nothing extremely revealing about this chart. But it's a completely different story when we look at the foundational eclipse. Now the foundational eclipse in this cycle happened in May 1501. And in my astrology software, I have May 26th, but if you research this eclipse in the cycle, it's going to show May 17th, but the date it varies because different calendar systems were adapted at different times, so the day of the month can vary. But what's important is that we look in the sky and we see the astrological positions. That's the key point. The date can be off by a couple days sometimes when you're researching these. So this eclipse, let's take a look. What are the major themes for this cycle that are going to be impacting the current eclipse happening? Well, this cycle is, first and foremost, I'm going to start with Uranus. You see that it is in Pisces at 3 degrees 59 minutes, and it's performing an almost exact aspect, a square aspect to a degree, to the new moon. So it's a very Uranus eclipse. So what does that mean? It's having that harsh square aspect. Well, what Uranus does is it brings new things into our lives. And those new things are usually in the forms of ideas. So it has this connotation of major insights that happen, breakthroughs in our concepts of ourselves, and just new ideas that can be very original and different ways of thinking about the world. It has this connotation of inventors and geniuses, and people who come up with ideas that their time has finally come, and boom, it's a new breakthrough. And affecting the new moon like that, affecting the eclipse, it's bringing something new into our consciousness. And it could be a new thought, a new idea, and sometimes it plays the form of a new person, a person who is a stranger, but you have something in common with that person, you can unite. So something new is being created, and something is being brought into our lives, inserted into our lives. And if you think about in the context of Pluto, Pluto's job is actually to remove things in our lives. But both Pluto and Uranus, and as well as Neptune, Well, let's stay with Uranus and Pluto. What they do are connecting us closer to a closer understanding of who we are. Pluto does it in a very deep spiritual way, where we're taking away or destroying concepts about ourselves. Uranus is bringing new concepts into us that are meant to, again, bring us closer, get a close understanding of who we are as individuals, to be a truer expression of who we are, something that is an insight that'll help us become more in touch with our deeper sense of self, our self-identity. Well, this square 90-degree aspects are considered difficult because they are things that we typically are aware of in some capacity, but they present something that is difficult in the sense that it causes a tension that we're not really, that we don't really want to have to deal with, and something that creates an obstacle in our life. So something that can cause a major shift in an uncomfortable way. So Uranus aspecting a square aspect is bringing something new into our consciousness, a new idea, a new person, a new event, a new situation that is difficult to get through and is not flowing in the way we'd like. So a lot of times these are felt as experiences that we just don't want to have to deal with, and the obstacles in life that cause us to have to really think more than we would like to think about. So this difficult aspect onto the new moon onto the new moon solar eclipse bring something new into our lives that maybe we didn't want to have to know, or inserting a new thought into us that we have to really deal with, and it could be a very unpleasant truth, but it's meant to get us closer to a truer understanding of ourselves and help us to grow spiritually but also psychologically. And in the world context, it could be a sudden kind of situation that presents people with a harsh reality check, in a sense. And I say reality check because if you look right next to the eclipse point, the new moon, the sun and the moon conjunction, we have Saturn sitting right there about 3 degrees, a little bit over 3 degrees. It's not very auspicious to have Saturn sitting right in the eclipse path. And let's break it down. What does it mean? What does the word eclipse mean in English outside of the context of astrology and astronomy? When something gets eclipsed, it gets overtaken or darkened, which makes sense because it's in the astrological sense, but something that has been overcome, or it's used oftentimes when someone has been defeated. They were eclipsed by another person. And in the context of astrology and astronomy, in the context of astrology, when a planet gets eclipsed or is close to the eclipse path, we can't really use that planet to its fullest extent. And there's some kind of unpredictability or chaotic influence into the use of that planet. So Saturn, the force of Saturn in our consciousness, our ability to use Saturn is going to be diminished, or it's going to be harder for us to use Saturn. It'll present some unpredictability and difficulty. And what does Saturn do? Well, Saturn is our ability to see things in life that are hard, that we really don't want to do, and be able to just trudge through them. And Saturn is our awareness of inevitabilities. Some things in life are just inevitable, and it's only a matter of time for those things to end. It could be a good thing. We know that, say we live in a fantastic life. Well, if you have a healthy Saturn, you know that one day life is going to end. Well, how do you deal with that reality? You deal with that reality by doing the best you can in this life. And that's when you have a healthy Saturn. It's dealing with things that are going to end one day, and dealing with the inevitability that we're imperfect people and that we all have faults. An unhealthy expression of Saturn is someone that isn't able to deal with the hard facts about life. They see life as difficult, which is true, And they don't want to have to deal with it. They don't want to have to address their psychological problems. They don't want to address their limitations. A bad Saturn, what it causes is life to feel that much more harder. It makes life feel that much more burdensome when Saturn is negatively affected in a chart. And the Sun and Moon both treat Saturn as an enemy using the Parashara system of planetary friendships. So whenever you have Saturn next to the Sun or the Moon, but in this case both, it causes what's called a starvation of those two planets. What it causes to the Sun is the sense of a lowered self-esteem, looking at your own faults too much, being so aware psychologically of the things you're not good at, and nitpicking your own self to the point that it causes your self-consciousness or your self-confidence to take a hit. With the Moon, it causes, again, the awareness of the Moon, your identity of yourself, your ability to perceive the world. It causes depressive tendencies because you're too closely aware of things being able to go wrong, or your identity feeling like you can't see past the faults that you have in terms of your awareness of yourself as a separate person, looking too close into your self-identity and not being able to connect with other people. So it causes depressive tendencies when it's close to the Moon. So Saturn hanging around the eclipse point like that, it's causing and with the Uranus aspect, what it's causing is something new inserted into our lives, and it's going to be something new that maybe we don't want to have to deal with, or a new reality that we don't want to have to deal with, and our ability to deal with it is diminished. And that reality, that new whatever it may be, it being difficult, we're not able to really cognize it very well, and we're not able to basically feel fortified. Our defenses are down in a certain way, and it can cause a sense of defeatism and pessimism. But the best way to deal with these situations, what Saturn's lesson is in life, is to realize that everything ends eventually. Saturn is time. So seeing that the eventual situation is not going to last forever, the awareness that it's not going to last forever, and simply detaching from the situation itself, realizing it's not going to last forever, and not over-identifying yourself with it, because difficulties happen constantly throughout life. And so what this eclipse is saying is there's something that is going to happen to each individual, or your awareness is going to be brought to something, and your ability to change it is extremely diminished. Because Saturn is also a neutered planet, meaning that it's not the masculine energy of going out and doing something, and it's not the feminine energy of receiving something. It has neither of these powers. It's just Saturn we use to just get through certain situations until they're over with. And sometimes the best thing to do is just to not do anything at all, to wait it out. So getting through the difficulties that can be presented and the tendency towards, say, pessimism or negative outlook on things, the way to get over that is to see that it's not going to last forever, and that sometimes it's best to just not do anything at all, and to just wait for a situation to pass, and to allow the cards to fall where they may, allow the dust to settle without overexerting yourself. And in order to not have this event cause too much psychological strife, because again, that's what Saturn does. It causes to feel the inevitability of things, and being realistic about things. And if we're positively realistic, we just look at the situation in front of us and we do what we can. And if we're negatively realistic, we are only looking at what bad things could happen from the situation, and then that can turn into pessimism. So seeing Saturn right in that path of the eclipse, it's going to be presenting difficulties that we're not sure how to deal with. And as I said, the best strategy is to sometimes just really be minimal in effort, and to be a little bit lazy and just let things happen, and not to over-identify with the events to too great of a degree to cause yourself more strife than you need to. So This Uranus bringing something new, something that we maybe don't want to have to deal with, a difficulty, an obstacle into our life, something that doesn't flow into our rhythm very well, but something that we have to deal with. And Saturn, the lessened ability to deal with it, the feeling that it's causing us a lot of harm and wanting to escape something that we're just unable to escape. So these aspects are, it's going to cause this eclipse and all of the eclipses in this cycle to have to deal with the harsh realities and new situations that can be presented to us that we probably don't want to have to deal with. But that's what this eclipse cycle is doing. And each eclipse is bringing us closer to this awareness, this other kind of reality of life. And what eclipses do is that they bring a new awareness, and they're all helping us grow spiritually. So it can be through difficult times and through difficult experiences, but other eclipses aren't all difficult, and great new things can happen in our lives. It just depends on each particular situation, each particular eclipse cycle, and each particular individual, what you're going through. And so the other point I want to bring to your attention is that we have Mercury in the eclipse path. Well, it's about, what is that? Over 22 degrees away from the eclipse point, 26 degrees in Gemini. And so it's in the eclipse sign, but not very close. So it's not going to be a very mercurial eclipse in the sense that our ability to experiment with options, the ability to see options is terribly diminished. But the problem with Mercury here is that it's getting, again, a square aspect from Mars. And Mars and Mercury causing this positioning in the sky, when these two planets, they're almost like opposites in some ways. Mars is our ability to do something, make a direct action and respond to some kind of problem or an emergency. It's our instincts, and it's our ability to do something based on an idea of how we do it. So Mars are our concepts. Okay, we do things this way. And when the situation arises, yep, that's what we're going to do. And so a good Mars is ability for strategy. And to see a problem before it gets there, or when a problem does come, being able to see yourself around the problem or through the problem. And a strong Mars is able to do that. Well, Mercury, it's not so much about doing. Mercury is investigating the possibilities of options. Oh, we could do it like this. Here are the pluses and minuses of doing it this way. Well, we could do it like that, but we could do it like that. So Mercury is our ability to learn and investigate possibilities in life, and to see all of the things and to really observe life for what it is, and be able to put patterns together. But Mercury isn't about the deciding, nor about the actual doing. It's about the learning and Mercury's communication. So what is it? It's about trading ideas to come to conclusions about things, and it's being able to say, this is what I'm observing in life, and I'm seeing this option. What do you think about this option? And that's what we're doing when we're communicating with people, being social. We're bringing in information. So Mercury and Mars, they have two different agendas in our consciousness. And when they are in a difficult aspect to each other, and in this situation a square, what happens is it's a conflict causing position, because there are certain things, we want to do something, Mars, and then Mercury maybe doesn't have the options. We're not really sure about what we want to do. And what happens is there's a conflict between doing and deciding what to do. And so when conflicts are essentially based on people disagreeing about what to do, disagreeing about options. So this eclipse also has this conflictual nature to it. The inability to accurately see the options, Mercury, or the lessened ability, the eclipsed ability to see and perceive the options very well, and Mars, the inability to actually live out and do that option. And there's also Mars-Mercury creates indecisiveness. And when you think about things on a bigger scale socially, not being able to decide a course of action is what happens is conflicts just keep brewing, and it causes deep frustration in people and anger, and then people can lash out. And so in this eclipse cycle, it's also showing that, okay, we've got maybe a hard slap of reality in the face, this Uranus-Saturn connection between the eclipse point, and then an indecisiveness about what to do. And that indecisiveness and the potential for conflict about what should be the course of action is also going to add a little bit of fuel to the fire of the difficulties I've already talked about. So the people that are saying this eclipse is going to be a difficult eclipse, well, it is for the reasons I just described because of this eclipse cycle. Because some people are comparing it to the 2017 eclipse that happened right over the United States as well. But that eclipse cycle was totally different. There were not these kinds of hard aspects onto the eclipse point, that solar eclipse, and it was in August 2017. That was an eclipse with a completely different identity. It's not going to be like that one. This particular one is going to have more of these themes of dealing with the harsh realities, something new that comes into life that presents us with a new challenge, and then the inability to really decide on how to deal with that challenge. And as I said, one of the lessons of Saturn is to first detach from the problem, detach from the weaknesses that we may have and faults we perceive in ourselves. And sometimes it's just good not to do anything and let the problem breathe itself, and let the dust settle and kind of let the pieces fall as they may. That's going to be the best path forward, in my opinion, about how to deal with these difficult aspects going on. And a little bit more about the Mercury part. Mercury having too many options and overthinking options is another thing to avoid during this eclipse. And at a certain point, we just have to simply realize that wanting too many options causes stagnation, and that's why Mars is such an enemy. Mars is always moving. It's our energy itself. It's our physical strength in that sense. So while I'm saying sometimes it's best to do nothing, Saturn, a healthy Saturn, at a certain point we have to put the options away and commit to something and live with that choice. And that's going to be another way to understand, to not allow stagnation, not allow the over-analysis of options, and to let conflict brew because of the Mars-Mercury square there. And a little bit, let me touch just briefly on what is happening is a Rashi aspect, Venus to Neptune. Now, Rashi aspects are a technique in the Gemini system of astrology where all movable signs aspect all of the fixed signs to a full extent, except the fixed sign next to that movable sign, and vice versa. All of the fixed signs aspect all the movable signs except the movable sign directly next to it, and all of the dual signs aspect one another. The most powerful Rashi aspect happens according to Navamshas. So, for example, if you have a planet in the first 3 degrees 20 minutes of Aries, it's aspecting the end point, the end Navamsha of all of the fixed signs. So it's going to be aspecting, Aries, a movable sign, a planet in the first 3 degrees 20 minutes, the first Navamsha, is going to be aspecting all of the fixed signs except Taurus, the sign next to it, in the last Navamsha, or 26 degrees 40 minutes. So there's a kind of a mirror effect. The most prominent Rashi aspect, Rashi means sign, the most significant sign aspect happens on the opposite Navamsha of that sign. A little bit complicated, hopefully it wasn't too complicated, but it's an important technique. We can see aspects we wouldn't be able to see without this technique. So Venus is in Taurus, as you can see, and it's Rashi aspecting Neptune, because Venus is, as you can see, 12 degrees, and then Neptune is at 19 degrees. So a Venus-Neptune aspect, and it's a Rashi aspect, so there's going to be an interaction between Venus and Neptune, and that condition, or that result, is being able to make changes in your relationship and make changes that are promoting healthy lifestyle choices in relationships. Neptune is about the changes that we make in life, and whether those changes promote a positive self-image, and whether those changes promote us to grow into deeper understanding of who we are, or whether those changes introduce deeper ideas of us deceiving ourselves. Neptune is about what are we using with our life as it is, and are we using things? Are we perceiving things with accuracy, and all the changes of life. So Uranus is about new things coming in. Pluto is about taking things away. Neptune is about the changing of everything. So Venus and Neptune connected like that in this chart shows that there is, again, the ability to alter your self-worth and alter and have a healthy self-value to your life that promotes an accurate understanding of who you are, and also promoting the ability to make a change in relationships that reflects a healthy give and take with your partner. So there is what can be that relationship theme, this Neptune-Venus connection, making healthy changes regarding relationships and not deluding yourself about what that relationship can mean. Sometimes the changes can be very minuscule changes. Other times it can mean a separation, maybe for just a few weeks at a time or a few days, or just it just means something that promotes a healthier exchange between the two people. So we have new things coming into our life, Uranus, Saturn, the need to separate and detach from the over-identification with the difficulties in our life, seeing that everything eventually is going to end, the indecision and potential conflict between Mercury and Mars, and the ability to make changes in our relationship lives. These are the main themes about this eclipse cycle. So as I was saying, the solar eclipse happening in April, we're not seeing too many specifics in terms of what's happening in the sky at that moment. So all of the themes, as I was discussing, are going to be that much more important. These themes are going to be really impacting whatever you have in Aries in those positions I talked about earlier. The one attributes about this eclipse that are worth mentioning, as I touched on before, is that Mercury is close to the eclipse point, which means that our ability to experiment with the options, our ability to find things that work well for us, our ability to communicate effectively, these things can be diminished and hindered because Mercury is so close to that eclipse point. So doing too much traveling can be a little bit problematic. Some people have to travel. Traveling is just a regular part of their routine. But allowing ideas to flow in, allow communication, not overdoing it essentially. Mercury being eclipsed can cause a lot of overanalysis and overthinking options. So that's going to be a theme. Then of course we have Venus near the eclipse path. So again, just a little bit of a touch onto Venus, nothing too extreme. What'll be more important, as I said, the interaction between Venus and Neptune, our ability to make changes, healthy changes that cause greater self-validation and a healthy sense of pride in us in terms of the relationships that we have in our lives, business and also romantic or relationships with partners. So in conclusion, we can't really get a very good grasp on this eclipse by just looking at that single chart. We really need to understand the cycle. And in this cycle, I think that this cycle is going to cause more strife than it is going to cause a sense of productiveness, that it's going to be moving our lives forward. I think that there's going to be a sense that there are things that we just can't control, things outside of our control, inevitabilities that are all of a sudden thrust at us. And it could be an uncomfortable truth about ourselves. It could be people that say something to us that catches us off guard. And it can be things that are, like I said, a slap in the face, when reality has that cold slap in the face. And so what we want to do is be really cautious and really introspective during these times of eclipses. We don't want to overextend ourselves because these are very volatile periods of time astrologically, but in general it can be a very It can be a very unpredictable time. The moon and the sun are the two core aspects of ourself, the two most important planets that really rule over our sense of divinity and our truest essence, the sun, and our self-identity, the moon, how we see ourselves as a unique person. When they're around these unstable energies of this case Rahu in the north and south node, it causes a disruption in those two key parts of ourselves. And again, this is the 30th eclipse going into the, so it's a waxing eclipse, you can think in terms of the cycle. So it's increasing in intensity. And that increased intensity means that it's getting closer and closer to Rahu. It can be an intense eclipse for this reason, because it's waxing. And you can think of the peak of this series, the peak of this eclipse series is in 2225 or something like that, when the eclipse is the strongest and longest in the sky. So we have another 200 years for the most powerful. But yes, it's going to, so the people who are saying this is going to be an intense eclipse, they're right, but for the reasons that I'm describing because of where it is in this cycle. So hopefully that was helpful. Leave any comments about what you think about what this eclipse is going to be about. Any comments about eclipse cycles. I'm very interested to hear what you have to say and what you think. And stay tuned, I'm going to be doing a few videos on the coming big conjunction, or I'm going to be doing a video on the big conjunction of Jupiter-Uranus that happens April 20th, April 21st. And we're already going to start to feeling the effects of that. And that's going to kind of add as I said in the other video, a cherry on top of all of this eclipse energy that we're dealing with this month and into April. So stay tuned, and yeah, let me know what you think. Okay, thank you.